the cross has become the label of artist Dinghy. So whenever you take a look at the painting, you can immediately recognize, oh, this is a Dinghy's painting, Dinghy's artwork. That cross has become symbol. That cross has become his life. Not only his art, but his life. His life is closely connected to that. So my question is, has the cross ever appeared in your dream?
因为我很少做梦，我几乎记不住我的梦，但是实事实际上是在我的这个日常的生活里面，它是一个普遍存在的，或者是无处不在的这样的一个状态。那么，为什么刚才李教授一直在说，时事变成了，比如说我的标签？但是我觉得，实际上标签它也是一个艺术家的风格的某种显现。但是呢，因为时事实际上是建立在一个方格的基础上，然后方格里面布满了时事，的确变成了一个标签。但是这种标签呢，也帮助我能够不断的画任何的东西，任何的转型，仍然可以辨识，哎，这个是我的作品。我觉得它变成了一个底板。我们这个艺术家到了一定的这个工作的这个年限，他的作品图像他需要转型，需要不断的去找一种新的可能性。那么在这个转型的过程，很多艺术家实际上就是不可辨识了，它会存在一个跟前期的大家所熟知的风格落差的巨大的一个问题。那么很多艺术家就因为转型，然后突然在艺术的这个领域里面消失了。所以我觉得我的这个符号，包括这个方格的这个框架，实际上是让我可以避免在转型中迷失，或者是不可被辨识的这样的一个状态。谢谢。
One of the reasons I asked that question is that you may know the English artist Lucian Freud. He's a portrait artist. He dreams a lot. When he was drawing a particular figure, and it started to appear in his dream, for instance, he says he already started to practice of painting. Why he has become one of the most famous portrait painter is that he said he learned through the dream. He is a grandson of the Sigmund Freud. You know, Sigmund Freud, the most famous psychologist. So Lucian Freud's case is something very special in a way. He says he rarely dreams. That means he doesn't dream that much, well, then occasionally. So I understand that. So we say Dinghy is an artist of the cross or a cross artist. And then that cross, as he said, the grid or cross or variant cross has become a very important part of his life. The cross has become already very important family member to him. Have you ever thought of a kind of partial separation out of that? That means he won't be able to survive without cross. So he won't be able to create any kind of work without cross. It has become not just an element of the artistic practice, but on the other hand, it becomes really part of his life. So Dinghy's breathing comes out of the cross, let's say. So even like a partial separation or entire breakup out of the cross. This could be a kind of a bit stupid question on the one hand, but on the other, you see, living with the cross for 40 years, and then that's a lot. So it occupied psychologically almost his entire life and continues to be.
一个艺术家总是脑子里面有一张大的图，比如说这个图可能是自己未来20年要走的道路，你会不断的想这条路怎么走。也可以说，虽然用了十字，用了这个方格， 它不是主题，它是一个工作的方式，或者是我的创作的某种框架啊。所以是不是画实质，实际上对我今天来说不是那么重要。我当然也可以，比如说用一个方形也可以来表达，它也是一个符号，就是说，但是它真正要表达的是实质组合起来的大的一个，比如说一个艺术家的一个想法和甚至于是一个思想。比如说我们刚才看的一些图像里面，比如说十四星系李教授策的这个深圳两馆的展览，我们可以看到红黑的色调里面有一个天际线，这样的作品实际上它是一个整体的对于这个宇宙啊星系的一个回应，也对于人类在时空里面的历史的某种回应。所以它背后实际上是要表现这些，而不是一个具体的实施的一个符号。但是一个艺术家实际上当你的这个创作走到一定的程度，你想要做的事情呢是不断的延展它的这种表达的形式，比如说不仅仅是日常的绘画，因为我还有很多年的这种比如说纸上作品的探索，也有一些雕塑作品的探索。那么雕塑这个探索呢，原来更加向公共艺术的方向，可能我会回归到跟我的这个实施创作的绘画性更有关的这种雕塑的领域里面，这个会有一些设想。当然最近几年也会尝试比如说影像的方式、多媒体的方式来表现这个符号，然后它的延展的这个部分。还有很多比如说版画这种形式，就是说拓展自己这个符号，然后让它能够承载不同的这种可能性，让它不断的有一些新的这个材料上或者形式上的一种延展。
You may know, I'm sorry, today I'm mentioning quite many of the Western artists, contemporary artists, but to give you a kind of classification, I'm calling them to our stage. You know, the Olaf Eliasson, he was born in Iceland, but he has a Danish passport. So he's an Icelandic Danish artist based in Berlin. And he had a solo show, just one work, Weather Series. Have you ever seen that? Olaf Eliasson's Weather Series is a really seminal piece. When he was first hosted by the Tate Modern, he was planning to do something else, but in the middle of developing his project, and he was thinking about the weather, which is a key in terms of climate crisis, climate justice, or climate collapse, whatever. There are many different kind of climate something. And that has become so iconic, so popular. People visited. The exhibition took place in the turbine hall of the Tate Modern. And it was so powerful. It talks about the environmental problems that we are faced at today. It talks about the future of the humans, Anthropocene, all different level of discourses. So it has become really iconic piece in the history of the Tate Modern. And then it called the largest audience at that particular period of time. So it happened in, if my memory is wrong, 2007 something. 2008? 2003. It's already 22 years ago then. It seems that most of you do not know that piece. If there is a way that we can connect through this TV, it will be easier for you to understand. One of the reasons that I was talking about is that they say he became so famous because of the Tate Project, because the Tate Institution is very important. But once I was invited to give a talk on that project, and I said, Tate Modern has become so famous because of this project, not because of Tate Modern he became famous. I wanted to remind them of the fact that today is the most important institution, famous institutions. They are so proud of being able to have that kind of name, Tate Modern, or I don't know, the Centre Pompidou or the Museum of Modern Art or Guggenheim, whatever. So those like famed institutions, but they have to understand they became famous because of the good projects. And they do not understand that part. You see, the space has to align with the artistic practice. If the space is not aligning with the artistic practice, it doesn't match. So what I'm going to ask Ignace is that he is in a way lucky because he gets invited from many different institutions. And then I feel that he almost annually taking a museum show almost every year. And then is there any particular space, I'm not going to mention the name, space that he would like to collaborate, he would like to have an exhibition? Have you found that important space fitting to his artistic practice?
实际上，今天啊，很多的这个展览和空间是非常有关系。李教授的这个问题呢，让我想起有一个角度，实际上今天很多的建筑师他创造了一种新的展示的形式，比如说赫佐和德拜隆做了泰特摩登这个涡轮大厅，因为有了涡轮大厅，实际上让泰特摩登变成了一个非常重要的一个美术馆，因为全球都在期待下一年度的涡轮大厅将展什么样的艺术家。那么同样的这些建筑，比如说朗努维尔在青岛原来的西海美术馆，那个空间实际上也给我当时要做个展带来了创作的灵感，因为它的7号厅实际上是有4个能够看到海的窗户，就完全像4幅海景画。在这样的一个空间里面，我又创作了7件和天海有关的作品，和这个建筑展厅和整个的这个周边的环境产生的连接，也包括比如深圳两馆这个个展，实际上它不仅仅是从展厅本身它的结构性或者它的这个白色的这样的一种空间感。这个展览是8月份，深圳最潮湿闷热的时候，所以这个也引发了我创作上的某种联想，所以才有了这个吊扇。因为我想在一个过渡的一个空间里面，能够让观众感到一些凉意，再进入到主要的这个作品的展区里面。除此之外呢，是比如说西藏的展览、宁波的展览都会有这样的一些空间上和作品的对应性上的考虑，包括有很多的实际上是为这个展览特意创作的一些作品，比如说近期7月底我在昆明当代做一个个展，为了这个展览第一次使用了之字形的这个结构，实际上它有一种3形的一种隐喻，为了这个展示这个作品，特意在展墙里面开了2个窗洞，和画幅一样的窗洞，来把外观的真正的山和作品里面的山形产生某种连接。所以一个艺术家有时候他通过空间去寻找，空间常常会向艺术家提问，然后他也同样会产生新的创作的动能。现在一直在用的慕课的形式，这个形式实际上来源于15年龙美术馆的个展。当时看场地，我就觉得龙美术馆的水泥幕墙的这个空间，特别是第1大厅，就是这么高大，然后又这么坚硬，艺术家的作品如何在里面能够产生某种抗衡的力量？你肯定会想用大画，对吧，来抗衡，但是有时候光大还不够，你还要有坚硬的这个材料，那就觉得这个画布、亚麻布是很难和水泥这样的一个材料进行对抗的，就想着用木板。当你用了木板以后，你就马上会有一个问题产生，这个文艺复兴之前几乎所有的中世纪的绘画都是画在木板上， 你今天用木板为了什么？就引申出来木刻和绘画这个结合。所以空间有时候会给你启发，在这个工作中推进了你的材料的调整。所以我觉得对我来说，很多的美术馆实际上都可以承载艺术家的这个实践的梦想，或者是展览的梦想。关键是你如何利用，如何来呈现你和空间之间的某种抗力所产生的这个作品的张力。
Oh, thank you. That is very inspiring comment. There's a saying in contemporary art society, in order to be successful, good artist, you should be able to find a good space, first of all. And then you should meet a good curator. And also you should build a healthy relationship with the supporter. This is very important in terms of a cultural facilitation today. Many museums or galleries, they should be able to find a good, healthy collector. It's not a deal, but healthy supporting system is very important. So my next question is that there must be unforgettable people in your life. It could be like your teacher, or it could be like a artist from home and abroad. Those who influenced you unanimously or unforgettably, or unknown spiritual supporter. So who could be the person? It could be like a group of people. It could be even history. It could be like a single person. Once I asked Li Yuan the same question, and then his answer was very interesting. I am deeply indebted from Chinese artist. Who is that? He said, Bada Sanran. That was really unexpected answer from him. And his whole life has been all the time reminding of the Bada Sanran. So Bada Sanran has become his spiritual advisor. You see, they're not contemporary figure. It's like a historical figure. But he influenced the Korean-born, Japan-living artist. He's a prominent figure today, but that was his answer.
可以说我没有一个永恒的精神的老师啊。我觉得一个艺术家的整个的这个历程里面，你会碰到非常多的对你艺术产生影响的人。比如说我读工艺美校的时候，我碰到了于右涵，他给了我现代主义的这个启蒙。比如说我碰到有一个汉斯·凡戴克，在88年的时候，他第一次把我一叠的这个画的照片排成了一条线。他说这些有关系，这些没有关系，让我看到了西方世界如何评判一个艺术家的一个职业道路，就是说一条主线。你必须是有判断、有思想的一条主线。早年，比如说，莫妮卡·德马代在这本书里面，他可能很早的一篇回忆文章，也是一个意大利人。我第一次出国是93年去威尼斯，那个时候非常年轻，也没有钱。他是在威尼斯大学读博士，研究中国现代艺术，所以我在他家住了2个月，包括李教授，我们合作了3次，也包括比如说劳伦斯。香格纳的画廊96年是他的这个开启之年，也是我跟香格纳合作的这一年。当时我就在香格纳画廊第一次做个展，也是香格纳画廊第一次做个展。我觉得一个艺术家的一生，不断的在一些交叉的点上，有一些特殊的人物给了你帮助，给了你某种启示，所以它是一个线性的。当然也有书本中的这个历史上的那些人物，比如说我为什么会有理性抽象，是当时看到了蒙德里安，看到了弗兰克斯泰拉这样的一种创作实践，所以我更相信这样的实践比表现性的实践更可靠。
What you mentioned is something very much expected, because you are not the person who has kind of a grand scale human relationship, but your memory with Monica Demate is very touching. You moved to your studio from Xi'an to Fuxingdao, right? Mm-hmm. And then you would have unforgettable memories, even during the period of the COVID, when Shanghai was locked down. And then I heard from you that you are entirely staying in your studio. So what is the movement of the studio to the artist? Once when I met Gerard Richter, and he said that he's been using the same place for 40 years. That was very touching. 40 years in the same space. It's not a short period of time. He's been able to build up his artistic career to be a kind of successful, really important artist in the art history. Not in the market, I'm talking about. So what kind of a perception you have or expecting compared to the Xi'an period, now the Fuxingdao period?
上海艺术家或者中国艺术家工作室的搬迁是一个常态我可能已经搬过7个工作室，每一次都满怀希望能够待得这个长久一点，但是每一次都不一定就是按照你的意愿能够实现。那么我在西岸工作室呢，原来的地方很好，西岸美术馆对面的这个小园区，然后香格纳画廊后面，所以我工作室的助理都是在香格纳画廊的食堂吃饭的。显然那一块呢现在已经拆掉了，我想能够永久一点的地方，所以选了复兴岛。差不多在1年前，我是一眼就看中了那个空间，因为非常高大，比我西岸的工作室更高大。西岸当时根本没有商业，叫外卖都叫不上的。这个是在大概11年前，所以10年就能够改变一个地方。在中华船厂不到1年啊，又开始有城市艺术季了。做了这个2次元的大型的活动，就是你过早的发现了这些厂房、这些空间再一次的复兴，再一次的被利用的这种可能性。另外一个呢，实际上工作室对于一个艺术家来说，特别是对我来说，可能是我除了睡觉，全部的时间是在工作室。所以它比家还要重要，因为它的所耗的时间最多。那么还有一个呢，是我家住在静安，然后北横通道过去呢，基本上半个小时。但是呢，它有一个心理距离，因为我原来在西岸，我有时候出去吃晚饭，晚饭以后我还可以回去工作。因为心理距离，你就是在市区，很方便。但是你现在在复兴岛，尽量不出来吃饭，这样的话呢，我就可以一直工作下去。那如果出来吃饭了以后呢，就心理距离就感觉你还回到那边，然后那边呢又有门卫，你车进去太晚了，门卫还奇异的眼光，因为现在艺术家还不多，所以现在处于一个工作室的一个开启的一个状态，因为它有一个心理距离，我就减少了很多的社会活动，所以它对我的创作来说是非常有利的。
Okay, today that's it. Thank you.